everybody to another video for today. Good lord. Like I mentioned, we were going to be doing reviews today for Thor, The Dark World, and Ender's Game with yours truly, R. Adrianus. If you caught the sit-downs from earlier today for inspiration, I mentioned how I actually got to see Thor, The Dark World, and Ender's Game in a row. I saw Ender's Game yesterday and I saw Thor the day before, and they were both excellent films. And I'm really glad because oftentimes when I want to do reviews for you guys, I'm not sure if if there's things that would be very relevant to you, whatever book I choose or comic book or movie, whatever. And so this, it's very popular. Ender's Game, almost everyone has read the book that I know of. And Thor, I mean, who doesn't love Thor? Everyone went freaking batshit crazy for the Avengers movie last year, and then I remember I was super excited for Thor the year before, and it was no different for this year when Thor: The Dark World was revealed, some months back, and I was really excited. He's one of my favorite superheroes, and I actually am really glad that the film franchise is doing its share of staying true to the character. The storytelling is pretty well done. So let's get into it. We'll start off with Ender's Game though, because I want to save my baby, my Thor, for the end of the video. Ender's Game, science fiction. It's was that brain fart. It's a world where these young children are going to be raised to be the best commanders in the international fleet, so they can fight against this alien threat that has once already tried invading Earth. They think that because the child's mind absorbs information that much better, can refine it, that they're the more apt to lead the fleet. So, what better way to have the best commanders than to use these children? I've already reviewed Ender's Game before, the book, and so doing the movie is just, I can't really say too much other than for visuals, because the story is essentially the same. One thing or a couple things, should I say, that they did omit for Ender's Game was that they didn't play much on Ender's relationships with his siblings, more specifically Val, less so with his older brother Peter. Valentine was present, or Valentine and Peter were present in the film, but they were just more to kind of like rationalize certain actions for Ender, his upbringing, where he's coming from as a third child, because in this world you're not supposed to have third children. You're allowed to if the family requests to have a third child, and Ender is his third child, and he was the smartest. But yeah, I mean, each of the siblings represents something for Ender. Valentine represents the sympathy, the affection that he can feel, how he can relate to others, and then Peter represents the violence that Ender is capable of, and those embodiments come to fruition as Ender grows through his training sessions, at battle school, at command school. So in this film, you don't get to see that as much. You don't see that made explicit. You really have to dig down, and even worse for me, because I already know these themes from the book. I see it and I feel like the filmmakers could have expanded more on that, because it seems like they were kind of afraid to pull certain thematic triggers. When it came to Ender's time to I guess undergo violentization. Violentization. It is a word. I've been reading some psych stuff. But yeah, violentization. He doesn't, or should I say, this iteration of Ender doesn't really go through it as much as the novel version of him does, especially with encounters like the salamander army leader Bonzo, who's another child who's being trained at battle school. There's those moments when Ender has shown how much violence he's capable of, but it seems in the film they weren't really prepared to go that far with the character. They wanted to make him still relatively innocent, partly more victimized than violent. So like he's violent because of his circumstances, but in the book it's a little different. So when you watch the film, it's those characterizations that make it a different experience. But other than that, the visuals were excellent. I mean, Battle School is almost exactly as I imagined it, and I'm sure many people will agree with me. They did an excellent job in the film to capture what Battle School feels like, how militarized it is, but at the same time how you kind of have that childlike essence still there, because these are still kids. They're still young minds, even though they're trying to make them as sophisticated as possible because they're such a delicate matter. you can't help but see like, yeah, these are still kids fighting, and but it's still really impressive when you see these kids and the strategies that they make, and then they stay very true to that from the book to the film. So for that, I do commend the filmmakers. Um, Ending wise, I will not be touching on the ending because it is one of those crucial moments in the narrative, both in the book and the film. Obviously, if you've already read the book, it's really no surprise when you get to the ending. But for the film itself, it does a good job to still make you tense, even though you may have already known the story, which I think was great because if you already know the ending, kind of there's really not that much appeal, especially with an ending that throws you for such a loop in Ender's Game. So for that, I do tip my hat off to the filmmakers. Ender's Game was a great movie for those who have read the story, or for those who haven't. If anything, it might be more enjoyable. But definitely go check it out. I recommend it. But let's move on to Thor: The Dark World. Thor: The Dark World, the third film to feature our God of Thunder wielding the mighty hammer Mjolnir. Um, the film comes down to it where I think it was just as great as the first one, which take that as you will. Some people want it to be they wanted it to be better. I read several reviews already, and then after having watched it myself, I kind of see where a lot of the complaints are coming from. They wanted this Thor movie to be a lot grander, to have a bigger scope, and it did have a bigger scope, but there were just certain faults that it couldn't overcome. There are very little things that kept it from being an extremely great Thor movie, but it was a good Thor movie. I enjoyed it still, and I try to take my biases out at the fact that I love the character. I read the comic book religiously, and yeah, I can't help but like Thor. He has a lot of really great characterizations that I love. In the film, we have a more calm, humble Thor as compared to the first movie, or even in the Avengers. In the Avengers, he's still a little hot-headed. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm a god. I can do whatever. You guys are so tiny." It's like, no, he's a lot more humble. He's almost monk-like in the way that he goes about his interactions with the other warriors of Asgard, with his father Odin. Obviously, we see Loki, who's in prison now because of his actions during the Avengers films, and I think the acting in this film was really well done. They stayed true to their characters all throughout. There really wasn't any shift, no falsehoods. If anything, they improved on several characters, namely Frisia. I can't remember her name. Even I know the Norse mythology, but the wife of Odin, who's played by Renee Russo, she did a very excellent job. Odin himself is still very Odin, haha, which is great. Sif. They expanded on Lady Sif even more, which was good. They were trying to kind of create a little subtle love triangle between Thor, Sif, and Jane Foster, but it wasn't really that expanded upon. As for the conflict, it's the typical, there's this ultimate weapon that we want to keep the bad guys from getting, but oh, lo and behold, they still get the awesome weapon. So it's like, yeah, you can't really complain about that. It's typical comic book storylines, and we've seen that in the other films, in all the Iron Mans, and we saw that in Captain America, the first Avenger origin story. With the Avengers itself, it's very typical of comic book. Like, oh, there's this insurmountable army that we need to defeat, these invaders. Ah, and we defeated them. Like, you can't really knock them for those plots. I mean, that's what it comes down to. They're still comic books. There's still a certain formula you have to follow for it to be believable. Because if not, it's just like you have superheroes going to buy groceries. It's like, not really. There's a good amount of humor, but provided by nearly all the cast, namely the most featured ones by Natalie Portman, Chris Hemsworth, and Kat Dennings' character. You guys might know her from Two Broke Girls sitcom. She's very good. She's the comic relief, but it's not. You don't really poke fun at the comic relief. It's just like it gives you some. It literally does relieve you from the tension of the film, because comic relief kind of you don't really take them that seriously, but it was good to have that character in the mix, because then it's just battling all the time, and you don't want that. Very well, very good use of the comic relief character. And if anything, I do tip my hat off to the filmmakers for the writing of the end of Thor: The Dark World, which I will leave for everyone to discover themselves. I thought the ending was excellent. I thought that, how can you kind of make this story that, is very easily resolved? Thor, fights the bad guys, and for all intents and purposes, will probably defeat the bad guy. So, you know, I mean, what does it come down to after that? And then they create a conflict at the very end of the film that I thought was great. And, you know, just the slightest spoiler. So if you don't want it, you feel free to go to the end of the video. But yeah, they do plant the seed for future conflicts, and they leave it at that. That's how the movie ends. So I thought that was great. Thor: The Dark World, just as good as the first one. May not have been better than the first Thor movie, but still great. Still very watchable. Still enjoyable. Go see it. If you're a Thor lover, or if not, it's still very good. But yeah, hope you guys have enjoyed these thoughts on Ender's Game and Thor: The Dark World. I'm going to be doing another review later this week, this time on a comic book. We're going to be reviewing X-Men Battle of the Atom. Battle for the Atom? I don't know titles right now, but there's be atoms being battled over. And yeah, it was an event that just finished with the Marvel franchise all throughout the X-Men universe. So we're gonna be going over that. Hope you've enjoyed the reviews. Make sure to like and subscribe, everybody, and hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Peace and love.